What's going on, everybody? I wanted to shoot a video. I was thinking actually in the shower last night. That's where I do most of my thinking. Um, I know a lot of people, and I've seen a lot of people talking about that they have trouble getting wood chips. And, they have I've seen people, "Well, I signed up for Chip Drop and they haven't brought me anything, and I can't find anywhere around me that has it," and, stuff like that. So I wanted to do a little video to talk about things that you can do that you don't necessarily need wood chips. I mean, hardwood wood chips from a tree service, something like that, they're good. And why, like right here, see, I luckily live next door to a tree service, but as these break down, these are a little bit dry, but as they break down, they really start to compost. But you don't have to have access to wood chips in order to have mulch for trees, garden, whatever, but especially for your fruit trees. There's a method that's in permaculture called chop and drop, and this, I'm going to show you some things that you can use. Literally what it means is you chop whatever the plant is, you chop the leaves and the stems and all that off, and use that as mulch underneath whatever you're trying to put mulch down. We'll start right here with this plant. This is a great chop and drop plant. This is Mexican sunflower. You may hear some people call it Tithonia because its Latin name is Tithonia diversifolia, and I know some people are going to scream that it's invasive, it's going to take over your yard. Yes, it's not native to Florida, but no, it's not going to take over your yard if you don't let it. And you can see how nice and bushed out this is. This will get twice this height, and it's usually at that point that it starts to make flowers, and the pollinators really like their flowers. But you don't have to let it get that big, for one thing. And the only way that the only way it's gonna spread is if you can see in here these canes right here. These are pretty thick canes that it grows on. If these get on the ground and kind of get buried in a little bit, they will put roots down. That's how it spreads. But you can manage that by not letting it do that. You can keep it cut and it's not going to go anywhere. This is a great plant to chop and drop because it's a vigorous grower. It tolerates pretty much any kind of soil, whether you've got sand, whether you've got no nutrients, whatever. It tolerates it. It can tolerate being like drought conditions fairly well. It does need some water, but it can tolerate not having very much. And there's actually Lonnie with the Reed Farm did a video where he took the leaves from a Mexican sunflower plant, made a compost tea with it, and then he actually bought a chemical test kit to test for the NPK, and surprisingly it was very high in nitrogen. So this plant adds nitrogen to the soil. It's not a nitrogen fixing plant, that I don't think, but the leaves do have a large amount of nitrogen in them. So you can come in here, see, like this right here, if you wanted, you could come in here and just take some pruners and chop all this down, and then you can literally just throw everything you chopped. Now I would cut it into smaller pieces, but you could literally just throw it on the ground. If you wanted to make 100% certain that it didn't put any more roots down, then just pull the leaves off of it and use the leaves, not the stems. I've never had any issues with chopping and dropping this and it putting down roots and spreading. I've never had issues with that. So I really think that's an unfounded fear of this plant. So this is a very good plant. And then once you have one of these, you really don't need to buy anymore if you can buy them. I don't know if they're allowed to be sold here, but because you can replicate it easily by just replanting it, or by getting it to root, getting these canes to root. You can take cuttings and start cuttings from it. It's a very vigorous plant. So once you have one plant, you don't need to obtain anymore. You can just make more. And it's a very good chop and drop plant. So that's one that you're going to hear a lot of people mention, is the Mexican sunflower. Another plant that I've heard is good for chop and drop is right over here, and this is canna. Some people call it canna lily, even though it's not. This is not a lily. It's actually related to bananas. But mine is pretty sad. It needs some water. These need a good amount of water to be happy, and that's why I've always had mine are not very happy all the time. They still grow here, but they're just not very happy. These make a lot of organic matter. If you can get them growing really nice, you can chop and drop these. Another thing, and this is a native Florida wildflower, and I like to use this for chop and drop, is this right here. This is the Latin name is Biden's alba. It's Spanish needle. Some people call it shepherd's needle. All of this, it makes a lot of foliage. All of this you can literally just snap off. I mean, you could pull it out if you don't want it somewhere, but it is a native plant to Florida. The pollinators, especially the bees, really like it. Honeybees, our native bees, all those really like it. The leaves are edible. It's just a good all-around plant, but it's easy to pull out if you don't want it somewhere. So if it's growing somewhere and you want to just pull it out, that's fine, but you can let it go and literally just come in and snap that much, or whatever, snap off parts, and there you go. You just toss it down and it will feed it'll rot and feed the soil. So it's a really good plant. They're trying to get rid of the weeds, even though Spanish needle is not a weed, it's a wildflower. A lot of people were trying to get rid of the weeds and all that stuff. Well, you're not going to. That's the thing. Unless you go, yeah, I could come in here and spread out tarps and solarize this whole thing. I don't really like the idea of solarizing, because you can damage the soil microbiome. You can damage, it'll drive away all the worms and all the stuff that wants to live in the soil. So I'm not a proponent for solarization. I know it works, but I'm not a proponent of it. If you wanted to get this, like a garden or tree or something like that, completely weed free, you're going to be working on it almost 24/7, especially here, because especially when we start getting in our warmer months and we start having our rain. Right now in the spring, I mean, I don't think it's technically spring yet, but right now in the spring, we're fairly dry. This is one of our dry seasons. But when summer comes around, normally that's one of our rainy seasons, and when it's raining all the time, you're going to be constantly having to pull weeds if you want to completely have no weeds in a garden. So one thing you can do, now there are some things that, yeah, you need to try to get rid of it, but one thing you can do is this right here, is chop and drop. Even in a garden, just you can pull the weeds out. Now, you do run the risk, if you do this, of it spreading weed seeds and you have more, but you still can pull the weeds out and then just toss them down around the garden, and they will break down into organic matter. Native Florida plant that I like to do this with, just because it's everywhere. This is Florida tassel flower. Now, this does something about this is a bit toxic, only if you eat it, obviously, but it grows everywhere out here. Now I don't think bees go to this a lot. Butterflies really like this stuff. But see, there's like a big clump of it right here. And this stuff is easy to pull out. See, I just pulled, there's the taproot. I pulled the whole thing out. And then you just do that. But you don't have to pull it out. You can just snap it off and then let it grow back. And trust me, it will. There's this right here, there's some Spanish needle coming up. But it will grow back. If you don't pull the whole thing out. Because believe me, you can mow this stuff down and it will just pop right back up. But yeah, that's all you have to do. You just toss it around the base of the tree. Eventually it will die and then it will start to rot. And it's really that easy. And you know, so now obviously stuff like these wildflowers are not going to replace mulch. For replacing mulch, you need something like the Mexican sunflower. But let me show you another a tree that is pretty common here in Florida, and it will take over an area. People like it for an ornamental, but it can be, you know, kind of, it will take over an area if you're not careful. But it works well for a chop and drop, and if you have a lot of it, you can replace mulch with it. This tree right here, this is a golden rain tree. These are very common as ornamental plants, and they grow very quickly. They proliferate an area if you let them. With during the fall, they bloom. And now one thing is, the honeybees absolutely love the golden rain tree flowers, and they're called golden rain trees because when they bloom, their flowers are a bright yellow, and there are tons of them. But the bees absolutely love them, and then they create little seed pods that are kind of a peach color, and then they die and drop to the ground, and you get rain trees everywhere. Let me show you what I'm talking about. We have one, you can't see it here, but we have a massive rain tree back in that little hole right there. You can kind of see that dead looking tree. It's not fully come back yet from winter. But like this one, a little rain tree here, there's a little rain tree right there. They're all in here. And that's from those seed pods falling to the ground and dying, or the seeds sprouting, and you've got rain trees everywhere. These are really good for chop and drop. You can grow these intentionally to chop and drop. You could literally plant golden rain trees, let them grow, and just use them as a chop and drop plant. Every time you chop them, they will grow right back. And you know, a lot of times that can be annoying, but when you're using it purposefully like this, that's a good thing, because you don't have to wait forever for it to come back. See, like you can see right here, I had cut this and it's already, like, see it coming back. And especially when it's warm and we're getting our rain, they grow like a weed basically. So you could intentionally plant this and then let it get so however high you want it to get, and then chop it down, and then take the branches and with the leaves, all that stuff. Now once it gets big, the branches do get bigger, so you can't just throw down an entire, well, you can, but the wood takes forever to rot down. But like all these stems and these leaves and stuff, just cut it back, and you could use that as a chop and drop intentionally. You can grow this intentionally and then plant other trees around it as it grows. Chop these rain trees down and use them as a green mulch. And see, like over here, I'll show you, there's this. See how big that trunk was? That was a big rain tree, and I tried to kind of bust it up so it wouldn't grow back. Well, there it is, it's growing back. So it's very easy to use these as chop and drop. Very easy. And they give you material constantly. The only time they don't is in the wintertime when they go dormant. But throughout the year, they give you just... so yeah, that you can think about planting trees like that, or plants that are vigorous growers, that the only reason you're planting them is to cut them down and throw them on the ground as a green mulch. Another thing you can get, and I'll show you, another thing you can get, and they sell these I think anywhere, are like ornamental bananas. This is an ornamental banana. I didn't mean to plant this here, but I had it growing up by my house. I didn't want it because it's ornamental, and I just tossed it in here and it rooted itself, and now it's growing back. You can plant bananas and their leaves get enormous, and let it grow and chop the leaves off. You're gonna have to chop those up because they're just so big, but I mean, it's so easy and it takes very little effort. Those big white bird of paradise plants, now I don't know if you can just hack those down because it may kill it. I don't know anything about those, but I imagine if you just take leaves off like you would a banana, just take the leaves, you don't have to take the whole plant. You could use that, and then you get, you get the flower and you get material for chop and drop. And then last, obviously, down underneath all this stuff, dead leaves. If you have a bunch of oak trees, if you've got a bunch of cypress trees, anything like that, take these dead leaves. You can either compost them and make leaf mold out of it, or you can just take this and spread it around underneath the trees, and it works as a mulch. The point in all this is that don't feel deterred that, oh, I don't have any mulching material. I can't get a hold of wood chips. There's no tree service near me. The chip drop won't bring me anything, because I've signed up for chip drop before and I never got anything from them, ever. So, and I've seen more than one person online talk about that they signed up for chip drop and they've gotten nothing. They've been signed up for months and months and months and months and they've gotten nothing. And I would say the one thing, yeah, chip drop is great, but the one bad thing about it is I feel like if you live in a rural area, you're going to be hard pressed to get chip drop to come to you. I think they do better if you live in the suburbs, and they can just it's easier to find your house, all that sort of stuff. But you don't need it. Like, yeah, if you can get wood chips, that's great, but you don't need it. You can use any of those plants that I mentioned today, and that's just scratching the surface. There is a guy that his name is Byron. His I think his YouTube is Byron Grows. I think that's what his social media is, all that stuff. And he's big into syntropic agroforestry, which I've kind of been looking into more. And he grows with any food forest. Now, he's done food forests here in Florida. He's done food forests in New Zealand. He's done food forests in South America. One of the things that he does is intentionally plants eucalyptus trees. That's especially, he does that especially in like New Zealand. You can plant eucalyptus in Florida, but he intentionally plants eucalyptus trees, lets them mature some, and then he plants food forests around them, and then he aggressively prunes them, and then does it as chop and drop. And just, he has, if you see any of his videos or pictures, all around his food forest, first of all, his food forests are just amazing, but all around the bottom of his food forests, it's just covered in organic material, because he intentionally grows trees and plants to chop and drop. And he doesn't use wood chips. He doesn't bother with trying to get wood chips. He just grows plants to chop and drop. And the ground around his food forests look like a forest floor, because it's just I mean, that's what happens in the forest. No one's going out into the forest and putting wood chips down. The reason why you can go into the edge of a forest and the soil is so good, it's because it's constantly got a layer of dead leaves, dead shrubs, sticks that fall, and the wood rots down. You'll get, sometimes you'll have animals that die and they rot right there, and that feeds the soil. And all the organic matter stacked up on the soil is calling in the worms and the primary decomposers and all that stuff. And it's just, if you move that stuff back and look at the soil, it's going to be the blackest soil that you've ever seen. And I mean, that's the way it is around my property. Around the edge of my property where there's all these trees, it's the best soil. And so you can imitate that by doing chop and drop and basically creating a forest floor. And you don't have to have hardwood wood chips in order to do it. So I'm going to show one more thing, and then that'll be it for this video. But I know I personally have been there where I felt discouraged because I couldn't get any wood chips. But I've seen it online, people talking about, I can't get chip drop to come out. I can't get any wood chips. I don't have anyone around me that has it, and I don't know where to go. My city doesn't have any, and all this other stuff. All you have to do is chop and drop. And you don't have to have plants intentionally to chop and drop, and you don't have to have wood chips. So this is a Shiranui orange tree that I planted over here, and I just planted it like a month ago, so it's still a baby. It is grafted right there, but I planted it over here underneath this giant oak tree. And yeah, you can see all these oak leaves, but also over here there are tons of rain trees. That's what so what you can do with these is, I am intentionally leaving. I was going to come in here and I tried to get rid of all these rain trees. Well, that's next to impossible unless you've got something to grind up the stumps with. So I'm leaving them, and then I'm going to, what I do with them is just to give you a little example. See, pull off that right there. Now usually if I wanted to do it faster, I get my loppers out and I do it, or I get my pruners out and do it. And then there you go. And you can see underneath there's some dead rain tree leaves. Underneath all this is all rotting down, and it's just layer upon layer. And it's the top layers are drier, yes, but the layers underneath are going to get rotten down, and it's going to feed the soil, and it's going to call in the worms and the decomposers. And it's just, the soil over here is so much better than in my garden because of all this, because there's constantly a layer of leaves and dead limbs and stuff like that. So, oh, that's terrible lighting right there. There we go. My ears look like they're glowing, but hey, that's okay. But yeah, you don't have to have wood chips. You don't. And not knocking them, they're fine, but you don't have to have them. So if you can't get them, think about other ways that you can create mulch, a mulch layer, and it's also going to break down and feed the soil. The easiest way to do it is through chop and drop, and intentionally plant plants that your only reason for planting them is to use them for chop and drop organic material. And it's not hard. A lot of the plants, once you do it, you don't have to keep buying it. You just plant it once, and either it will reproduce, or you can take cuttings and create more plants, or let it root itself and do that. Like you can intentionally let the Mexican sunflower root itself, and then you separate that from the plant and start a new plant. Don't be afraid of these plants that are very prolific. They're not going to take over your entire yard. Now there are some plants that will, and don't plant those. But, you know, most of these terrible invasive plants are really not that bad as long as you manage them. The only time they become a problem is when people just let them go. And, you know, that's when they take over everywhere. But anyways, I'm not going to get into that rant. Yeah, just think about different ways to create your own mulch if you can't get any. It's not the end of the world. You can do it without wood chips. So until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you later.